Finally, we feel close enough to the NBA draft to start talking about it. I've been wanting to do a series of these videos breaking down some of the picks, some of the mock drafts, some of the spots we think these players might land, but we have to start with the top 3 players. There's a pretty clear drop-off after those in terms of value. Of course, we're talking about Chet, Holmgren, Jabari Smith, Paolo, Banchero, and who knows where they're going to land. These teams at the top are obviously not very good, and they have weird track records, so towards the end, I'll go to where the best fits would be and how the draft might actually shake out. We don't have all the perfect betting lines yet on the draft. We will get to that eventually as we get closer. We'll do another video for that, see what we can try to make some money on. But for now, I kind of want to just start putting my big board together of who I like the best, who I relate them to, how I think this could shake out for each of these teams, and how I think they could fit with each of these potential landing spots. So let's jump into it. Now, right off the bat, Paolo is my favorite prospect in this draft. I don't even think it's necessarily close, especially offensively. This guy is a total difference maker immediately from the jump. I expect him to come into the league, not have a big learning curve. He's already 6'10", 250, probably can handle some more weight on his frame actually, but his body is pretty much ready for the league. Played at Duke in a tough conference, shouldered a lot of the load, looked good in the tournament. Scored consistently throughout the year, can rebound the basketball, actually passes pretty well considering his reputation for kind of just being score first and do nothing else. Had 2 stocks combined. I don't see much reason why he couldn't physically turn into a good defender, but the effort was not really always there at Duke. I don't think it was terrible though. It wasn't the kind of thing where it's like, this guy will never be able to defend. Like a, I don't know, my player comparison for him is a 6'10 Carmelo Anthony. And that sounds very good because I think it is. I think Melo's a Hall of Fame player. I think Banchero has the ability offensively to create in so many different ways and carry an offense just with his scoring potential. But also, the same thing as Melo, both in passing and defense, he was always able to do it a lot more than anyone ever gave him credit for. Everyone said Melo was just a ball hog, could score 30, sure, but what else is he going to do? And come playoff time, is that going to be enough for you? And I always thought that was kind of a bad rap. Maybe it's because I'm a Knicks fan and I'm trying to qualify the trade that they made. That Amari team before they traded for Carmelo was so damn good. I loved it. But that's beside the point. Melo was always, somehow he would always flash brilliance in his passing ability. You know, just quick, no look, fire it across the court, find a lane. He could do it. And the same thing defensively. He wasn't great by any means, but he wasn't always a turnstile. When he really wanted to lock down, physically, the capability is there, and Banchero's even bigger, nor do I think he'll be expected to defend on the wing quite as much. So I really see so much upside in Banchero that I can't really understand how Smith or Holmgren begin to close the gap on what he can do. Holmgren, I mean, we're going to break them down individually, but as a whole, Holmgren, it is important to kind of compare them when you're deciding who you're going to pick at the top of the draft, right? So if you're looking at Chet, he's got one skill that you think could really transcend the same way Paolo does, I guess, right? You call it scoring and you call it shot blocking, rim protection for the two of them. Leave Smith to the side for now because he's a different case. I guess you could say the same thing about him, actually. 3-point shooting is where you really want that skill to transcend. But the question becomes, A, which of those 3 things are most valuable? Raw scoring potential, 3-point shooting, or rim protection. They're all valuable based on context. But at the top of the draft, I don't really want to be picking for team need. I want to be picking for, like, this guy could make the Hall of Fame kind of stuff. And so best player available doesn't even begin to cut it because you need upside, and best player available could be like a Keegan Murray who's going to come in for a good team and fit a good role. We'll get to that in a later video. But I just think the ancillary skills, removing the top skill from each of these 3 players, I actually think maybe you could argue that it's Smith. I think Chet is definitely 3rd on this list. He ranks 3rd for these 3 players. You know, spoiler alert, but yeah, they're in order on my tabs. But I think Banchero has the most likely outcome to raise those ancillary skills that you might be worried about. If you think that he's just never going to defend because he's not into it and you don't see it, That's fine. But that's not really how I felt. If we look at his game logs from college, let's see. Do they have the tournament in here? They do. So 2010, 2 passes, 6 offensive rebounds. I really like that. Had 2 steals. Am I off here, actually? Let's see. 2 blocks, I'm sorry. Which is probably better, right? 6'10 guy, he's going to be asked to protect the rim. Maybe in this world, he might, to call Paolo Banchero a small ball 5 is ridiculous. But if you're 6'10 and you're in the NBA, you might see minutes at the 5. That's kind of how it works. But the blocks in any case, and you see a bunch of them here, 3-block game, 3-block game. Yeah, he might stumble into them because he's tall, but it shows me effort, especially in this UNC game where they were outsized and out-toughed and out-strengthed. So, yeah, I just saw flashes of certain plays where you're like, if he decides he wants to do this and he needs the right coach and motivation and blah, 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 he really could elevate the defense. He is the 3rd best defender of these 3. I won't deny that. But he's also the most well-rounded offensive player of these 3, and I'm willing to deal with that as a combination. Now, you could look and say, well, where is his 40-point explosion game? You know, it's just not here. But they had so much talent on that Duke team, and they went through some ups and downs. That Duke team defensively was so horrible to start the season, and then when games started to matter a lot more, they really turned it around, and I don't think that was due to Paolo, but I think he's involved and deserves some of the credit, right? So where Melo ultimately fell short in his quest for an NBA championship, maybe he'll still get one, who knows, but I just think that Banchero can use that as fuel to kind of, if he decides he wants to turn it up on that end, he can. And you can see that in late stage LeBron a little bit too, right? Not that I'm cross comparing this at all, but the knock on LeBron, which I don't really share because I'm a Bron guy, but people say that like during the regular season he coasts, he doesn't really play a lot of defense. His defense has waned in the later years, whatever. He's 30 some odd years old. It's fine, happens. But you always see it turned on when the games matter, even now. And I see some small level of that in Paolo. And you can really see it on the glass too, right? Because you could say the same thing about rebounding as you do about defense. It's mostly effort. And there are a lot of games here. 10, 10, 11, 10, 14, 10, 10, 15, 13, 12, 11, 12. It's not all the time. He averaged 7.8. That's pretty good in 40-minute games, right? Playing a lot of minutes, I get that. But still, the effort was there. So I really just think this guy has so many spin moves. His post game looks completely clean. The touch on the jumper is really good. 34% from 3, but I really think he kind of improved. Let me go back to the game logs for that a little bit, because I saw in some of the bigger games he seemed to do a little bit better and didn't get wild with how many he took, right? Early in the season, you see the 8. Like, that's too many, but that was a game against Gonzaga, which was a tough one. They did win. But then you see efficiency here. 2 for 4, 1 for 2, 3 for 4, 2 for 5, 2 for 4. I mean, these are the NCAA tournament games. That's the end of it. He never shot under 40% in the tournament. Now, maybe he was just playing well, whatever. But you see some of this when the game started to matter a whole lot. And the free throw percentage, pretty solid, 73%. So I see him projecting as maybe not the shooter that Jabari is, but it won't shock me that much if he gets to a level where he's a reliable three-point shooter, in addition to the mid-range game that he has, attacking the basket, all the post moves. This guy has a really, really polished offensive game, and I would take him number 1 overall without any bit of question. Let's move on to Jabari, though. He's my second favorite. They are different. They're both 6'10". Paolo is much bigger, though. Jabari's 220 pounds. Paolo's 250. They both could grow into their bodies differently. Who knows what's going to happen there. But you did see the raw shooting potential in Jabari Smith, which is tantalizing, frankly. 42% from 3. I mean, that is crazy. Almost shot equally from 3 as he did from the field. Really, I mean, unheard of level shooting for a 6'10 guy. GMs must be just salivating at the idea of getting a 6'10 stretch player who can kind of play the 3, the 4. Again, if you're 6'10", 220 pounds, I don't know, but you might see time at the 5 in the NBA. And honestly, it seems like he could have played shooting guard at times, even though he's so big. So I see a lot of the player comparisons for him being like a Rashard Lewis type. I'm seeing it like kind of a Michael Porter Jr. currently, who I can bring up his stats, and without the back injury concerns, by the way, which is kind of nice. I'm sure if Denver could start over and not pay him that contract and replace him with Jabari Smith, they would. But, and let's look at him in college too, actually. Because I think it's a relevant comparison when you think about how he's been playing. So Porter Jr. only shot 30% from 3, and then has kicked it up immediately to 45-ish. That was last year. This year was injury-riddled, and we're going to kind of cross that out. But already was above 44. And this was an injury-riddled season, too, at Missouri. He only played 4 games, so this 30% number doesn't really matter. We can look closer at the NBA stuff, but you saw a huge leap from him immediately, and I can see that kind of thing happening with Jabari, too, taking a minute to kind of figure it out, because he's not a real ball handler, right? We know that, and a lot of the knock on what he was able to do overall, points-wise and impact-wise, and the knock on Auburn in general come tournament time, myself included, I probably put a video out about tournament time when I was making my bracket about this. The guards for Auburn just didn't know how to get him the ball very well, and they kind of thought the show was theirs, and they could just do whatever they wanted and dribble a ton, and Jabari ended up having stretches where he was unbelievable, but then getting left behind, because if you're not the initial creator, then it's hard for you to play at like MVP style level. And is that fair to talk about him being a potential NBA MVP? I don't know, maybe not. But if you're talking about maybe drafting a person number 1 overall, that's the expectation I want to have, at least. I don't think that's a crazy statement. So when I think about Jabari, he fits so perfectly in 2022 basketball. Big, long, potential to defend multiple positions. Although I got to say, I don't know if his defense is as polished as some people are giving it credit for. I think he's closer to the Paolo Banchero defensive level than he is the Chet Holmgren defensive level. I know that's like comparing wildly different things, but it's just kind of how I feel about it. So yeah, there's potential for versatility because he can move his feet and he could probably defend on the perimeter better than Paolo can. I won't deny that. And I do worry, though, about in the post, if he's forced to play down there, he's going to be real small and get bullied. He doesn't really play 6'10". He plays 6'10 with the shooting length, but that's not everything. And I feel the same way about Porter Jr., right? That doesn't mean he's a bad player. It just means he's limited as a youngster. And both of them can improve a whole lot. And if I saw Jabari Smith come in and score 19 and 7 with no real assists or steals or blocks, but was shooting 44% from 3, everyone's going to be like, yeah, we made a good pick here. So that's a little bit where I'm at with Smith, is like, good shooter. No doubt he's going to put the ball in the bucket. There's no doubt that a high percentage three-point shooter is ultra valuable in 2022 NBA, but I don't know what else he's going to bring to the table. He's going to be able to put some defense in, sure. He's going to be able to maybe handle the ball a little better than some people, but I wouldn't ever call him a primary ball handler. Not even like to the level that Bam is or anything like that. I don't anticipate him being like a point center in any way. I think he's just going to be like a stretch 4 and pretty much just that, but really good at it. Like Porter Jr., I'm not scoffing at. I wanted the Knicks to draft him. I still wish they would have. They took Kevin Knox. You got to be kidding me with that pick, but I mean, how many times can I go through it? So yeah, I don't know. I don't think Jabari's going to be like a volume shooter with a high percentage or anything. I don't want to limit him like that, but you know, maybe you look at like, what is Chris Middleton's numbers like? And he's smaller. He's probably, 6'7", but that's how I see Jabari playing. And same weight. And you see him shoot about, career 40% three-point shooter. Has filled it up plenty. He can handle the ball a lot better than Smith, so maybe this isn't a perfect comparison, and he can pass it a little bit better too, but you're not expecting him to bring a ton of defense to the table. You're expecting him to shoot efficiently, play off of what is probably your primary ball handler star, which is why Milwaukee worked so well and why they lost the series in the playoffs this year. And that's kind of where you want to go with Jabari. I don't know if you're having that same elite primary the guy kind of expectations that you do with Paolo. So that's why I have him number 2. But that's not to say that he can't fill a great role here. So somewhere between the Porter and the Middleton thing with maybe a little bit better movement and defense. I do acknowledge that he has a higher defensive upside than Paolo does. And you saw some rebounding numbers here, which shows effort. I do think Paolo's the bigger, stronger kid. But you did see more steals and blocks, and you did see plenty of games where he could really get it going. And in those games where he wasn't getting the ball a ton and the shot wasn't dropping, the 3 for 16 in the playoffs, NCAA tournament, he at least put in 15 rebounds. And so that's going to happen. Shots don't fall. What are you going to do? He truly didn't have good guards to get him set up in the right spots. It's not an excuse, but it is a fact. And I do like that he had 3 blocks and 15 rebounds in a game where he just couldn't get the ball in the right spot and couldn't get it to go down, honestly, against a really, really good Miami defense. We hit huge on that back in the day. Man, a lot of our positive unit count came from that game. Big time. I think we hit for like 6 or 8 in that one. Huge. But yeah, I mean, you saw the flashes. You see the shooting ability. You see the body type. I'm not down on him at all. He's my second on the board, but I hate getting caught up in this individual skills. It's like playing NBA 2K and thinking, well, if I could just max out this and then have everything else be all right, the player would be solid, and you lose some of the upside. I'm not saying he's a role player, anything like that. I just think Paolo could be the guy, and I'd be a little more surprised if Jabari Smith wasn't a really good number 2. And look, maybe a higher floor, though, right? If you're drafting for that, he has the highest floor. Chet has a defensive floor for sure, but there's concerns about that we'll get to in a second. Yeah, Jabari is going to fill that role, right? I just get concerned about drafting guys for that so high in the draft. If you told me that you were drafting a modern-day Rashard Lewis second overall, I'd be like, okay, it's good. He would be better with a good team. We'll go through the teams in a second and where fit could be important, and I do think it's really important for him, but yeah, if you're drafting him thinking he's going to be LeBron James and dominating the basketball with a high usage rate, I don't think that's what he's even trying to do or projected to do. So it's important to have the right expectations for Jabari Smith, but if you do, he can fit into them really, really nicely. And then Chet is third for me. Look, the size, the length, the shot blocking is all there. I realize he might go number 1 overall, and if I were to put together a mock draft, which we'll talk about in a second, I might have him number 1 overall at what I think will happen, but not what I think should happen. And here's why. I just think it's just a limited player type, right? Like, you're 195 pounds. He might put on some weight, sure. I don't deny that he will. I really think he'll fill into his body a bit. But if you're talking about upside and player comparisons for Chet, you got to really run the gamut, right? Because there's a lot of risk here. He could get pushed around big time. I know this isn't exactly 80s NBA, but there's a lot of good centers in the league. And when Joel Embiid comes to town, what is Chet Holmgren going to do? He's not going to deal with Jokic either. He's a good shot blocker. But physically on the ball, he might get bullied by some of these guys. Now, the upside to me is a Rudy Gobert with more range. Because he can shoot the 3, which is, again, a reason why people are interested. And that's some of the reason why Rudy is limited. But just by design, these style centers that protect the rim are limited in general because all anyone is going to do to you is try to pull you out to the 3-point line, go small against you, and neutralize that rim protection by forcing you to defend 3-point shooters. What is Chet going to do? Can he move like that? He can move maybe better than Gobert, but the lanky body type, if he's forced to defend the perimeter, there's probably someone else on your roster that's better at doing that. And I don't deny he can fill a great role and protect the rim, and you need that. People need that on their roster. But if you're talking about drafting this guy high, giving him a big contract, including all the risk, because, by the way, the middle-of-the-road comparison is like a Sean Bradley type, probably, which I don't know what his stats are like off the top of my head. I feel like he had a good NBA career. Yeah, I mean, he blocked a ton of shots, but never was able to really score. Didn't have the jumper that Chet does. I acknowledge that. So you can add some threes into the mix there. But the steal numbers were never big because physically he got a little outmanned, right? If he's going against strength like Shaq or something like that, it's going to be hard. And, that's where the Embiid comparison comes in. Not that they're the same, but modern day. And then rebounding numbers are like, okay, well, you were 7'6" and you couldn't put up 10 rebounds a game. And you look at this, and he didn't put up 10 rebounds a game. It's college, different. He'll fill in. But he also had Timmy next to him, which he did a lot of that dirty work on Gonzaga. And that team was really good. And I just don't know. I'm not saying he can't, but I don't know if Chet is going to do all that dirty work on an NBA team that you need him to do. And if he does, is he going to hold up physically and not get injured? It just scares me. So you have the Sean Bradley. I mean, what did Sean Bradley do in college? Shaq Bradley? Bradlett? Subconscious, always putting Shaq into everything, rightfully so. BYU, Sean Bradley, 15 points, 8 rebounds, 5 blocks. Chet had 4 blocks, 14 points, 9 rebounds. I mean, it's just not. I'm not saying this is his upside. It's not. I said Rudy Gobert with length. I mean, that's like all. Rudy Gobert with range is an all-star level player. It is. But then you also have the downsides. One of my favorite college players, Hasheem Thabeet. I was there at UConn when he was there. He was blocking everything under the sun. 4.5 blocks. Huge guy. Had a lot of weight to him, too. He couldn't move his feet as well as Chet. He wasn't as agile. So this isn't a perfect comparison, I acknowledge. I'm just talking about the downside and potential risk, right, of flaming out when you're a big man. It is possible. And he couldn't score like Chet. I'm not saying they're the same player. But you did see him go second overall because teams were like, well, center that can totally shut down and protect the rim. It's a kind of a cool thing. We want that. And that's what Chet brings to the table. That's his biggest strength. If he's out there just three-point shooting, you can find a lot of guys that can do that that don't have the other weaknesses. So it's kind of like when I look at Embiid and I'm like, okay, he can play around the perimeter, he can dribble, he can shoot threes, it's all awesome. But do I actually want him doing that a lot of the time? It's an important thing to kind of not bluff because you want to utilize it to keep the defense honest, right? But if that's all he's doing offensively, it's not as impactful as you want it to be. And if he's doing a good job screening that like Gobert does, then great. But is this the type of player you want to take first overall? Is the upside there? Because in today's day and age, if you're not a Thabeet, if you're not a Bradley, if you turn out to be the Gobert with a three-point range shot, if you're closer to Embiid than I'm giving it credit for, if you handle the ball more often and can be an offensive cog like a Jokic, right? Just talk about these guys. Those guys I'm willing to pay. But how many NBA centers am I actually willing to pay? Not willing. Highest paid NBA centers. And these guys make a lot of money. And right out of the draft, you might not make a lot. But the Knicks went through this with Porzingis, right? And I hated when they traded him because I don't like when a team drafts a guy expecting them to be the face of their franchise, and then they play pretty well, and then they decide, well, this isn't the type of player we want to pay. Well, then don't draft them in the first place because you're wasting time. Because anyone Chet goes to in the top 3 is very unlikely to compete for an NBA championship by the time that his first initial rookie contract is going to run out. And if you have to pay him right after that, we're getting to a point in this league that we know about that guys become unhappy. They want to demand trades, even if they're just restricted free agents, they want to be in a different place. I'm not saying Chet is going to do that. I'm saying the team has to think about this before they ever go into the contract. So when you're talking about which guys you would pay as NBA centers, you have Embiid, you would definitely pay. He's worth his money. Do you want to pay Gobert $40 million? We're talking about this with the Jazz constantly. What are they going to do? They've kind of maybe capped out on where they are. Do they get rid of Gobert? They probably will if they get a chance to. He's a pretty young guy. He's only 30. And they haven't gotten to the mountaintop. They haven't even gotten close to the finals. So if I don't want to pay him and he's most of the upside that Chet is, why am I going to want to pay him? Towns is a different animal because he's an offensive player. But even that, you're seeing some of like, I don't know, you saw some aloofness in the playoffs of like the fouls and the basketball IQ. And I'm not out on Towns, but he's 27 already. And do I want to start paying him $40 million a year? And do I think he could win a championship? Because they haven't gotten close either. And I like Minnesota, but I'd choose Anthony Edwards over Towns right now if I could. Jokic, I'll pay. He's an MVP. Fine. Throw it in there. Embiid and Jokic, I'm willing to pay. Horford has been awesome in these playoffs. Don't get me wrong. He has been great. Probably approaching Hall of Fame level, especially if they win the championship here. But he makes $25 million. I don't know that I'd bump that up to 35. Vucevic, limited player. Jared Allen is a good comparison. If Chet Holmgren turned out to be Jared Allen, you'd be psyched. I think Cleveland is really happy with Jared Allen. If he doesn't get hurt, I think they make it past the play-in, and I think they're an interesting team. I think they'll be back next year. I think he serves a really good role. Don't get me wrong. But if you drafted Jared Allen first overall, and he turned out to be the Jared Allen that you have now, you would say, I mean, it's not a bust at all. Great player, but is this what you wanted? Didn't you want the upside that I described with Paolo and Jabari? More Paolo than anybody else. I know I keep harping on it, but I can't get to the point where I want to pay these guys more. Do you want to pay Jared Allen $30 million a year? I don't know. You're going to have to, though. And the Nets decided that they didn't want to, and they looked foolish because now they need a player exactly like him. But when it comes to the Cavs, and they have to pay Mobley and Allen together and Garland, are they going to be like, well, is this going to win us a championship? I hope it does. I like that team. I have a lot of their sports rookie cards, by the way. But I don't know. I'm not sure what to do with this because in general, I'm finding all these guys. Clint Capella, I don't want to pay him this much money. $20 million? No. Miles Turner? No. Steven Adams? No. Valanciunas, really good player. He's going to get a contract. He makes 15 now. He's going to make 25. Do I want to do that? I don't really think so. Wendell Carter, Brooke Lopez, all these guys. Now we're getting to a point. Okay, right? So to cut it off at the top 10, we're getting to a point as we go lower that these are the guys I would probably just prefer to target. Who's a good veteran that you can get for cheap? Like, there's got to be somebody here. I mean, maybe they're not getting Nerlens Noel, right? How much did Nerlens Noel make this year? That's a hired gun that you can get for $10 million that can protect the rim. What are his stats like? And I like Nerlens Noel. I don't have a problem with him. But he was a high draft pick too, right? Where was he drafted? 6th overall. And I think if you go back to 2013, you would have said, I probably had higher expectations for Nerlens Noel than he ended up having. Is he a bad player? Not at all. He serves a role. His per 36 minute, he doesn't really start a lot, so I want to give him some credit on the stats. His per 36 last year, 3.3 blocks per game, one of the best in the NBA. And maybe Chet can be a little better than that. I'm not saying he can. He's bigger and whatever, thinner, but still both thin. But these are the kind of guys you can get by just paying $10 million instead of paying $30 million for a guy that maybe is better, but is he triple the price better? I don't think so. So I don't know if I'm saying that I just wouldn't draft a big man anymore at the top of the draft, but I'm getting closer to saying that unless they have the capabilities that some of these other dominant forces have. If I see Joel Embiid potential, I am in. Even Towns' potential, I think, is much bigger than Holmgren because the offensive capability. I don't see the offensive game being like eye-popping from Holmgren. I think he can serve a role. I think what you're really getting him for is the rim protection. And I think you can get rim protection for cheaper than a number 1 overall pick and whatever the hell contract is going to come after that. I'm having a hard time seeing how he's going to live up to that number 1 pick status. Whereas with the other two, I can see a higher floor. The floor for Holmgren is cool for rim protection, but if he gets hurt, if he is out muscled, all these different factors and the limited upside, in my opinion, I just can't get on board with putting him above 3 on my big board. So that's kind of where I'm at. And we'll see. Maybe we'll get some good odds in the draft. But this is just my projection of how their careers are going to go. You look at the actual board and you see Magic pick number 1 overall, Thunder pick, and then Rockets. I actually do think the Magic have a history of taking these long rim protecty kind of guys. The Mo Bamba they got. Jonathan Isaac they liked. They like this defense-first lankiness. I think their GMs and front office members worked in Milwaukee when they drafted Giannis, which is the same kind of thing. Is Chet going to be Giannis? I don't think so. Maybe they do envision him being more of a ball handler and less of a rim protection center. I don't know. If that's the case, then fine. But I do think the Magic are most likely to go with Holmgren, and I think it's a mistake. I think, first of all, you're wasting whatever you have in Mo Bamba. I think there's something there. He had a couple of games this year where it was like totally ridiculous. What were those games? I mean, didn't he have like a 2020 game? Can't be making that up, right? Sort by points. 32 he dropped with 4 rebounds. I mean, Jesus. 27 and 12, 21 and 12, 21 and 10. Okay, not quite as good as I would have thought. 14 and 18. He had some big rebounding games. I mean, solid. But I'm just saying, like, this is the kind of thing you got him, and now you're just replacing him with Chet, or you want 2 of these same guys. I don't really know what you do there, but I do think they're going to do that because even the Franz Wagner pick, like length, right? They love this kind of shit. I do think, though, if you put Paolo on the Magic and you kept Bamba and Franz and Suggs and Cole Anthony, you got something cooking there where you can really play offense. You can. And the defense might be a problem, but you have Suggs in there. You have Franz to defend, and I do think Paolo would get a little itch of the energy, right? And if Bamba can be that rim protector and even give you 80% of what you thought Chet could, I don't see why they wouldn't go with that. I don't really know if the Jabari Smith thing fits for the Magic because they need a guy. They either need a guy on the defensive end, which they think Chet could be, or the offensive end, which they think Paolo could be. And then you probably just bump Cole Anthony to like a really good 6th man, or maybe you move some things around or whatever. But you need Suggs to be able to play better either way. I'm just saying, I don't anticipate the Magic actually going with Paolo, despite him being number 1 on my board. I think it's more likely they go with Chet, and I think it's most likely that it just doesn't work out and doesn't really move the needle that much. I hate to say it. I'm rooting for him. I liked watching that Gonzaga team. I just don't see it all the way there. For the Thunder, it's funny. I don't know. It depends what they do with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, right? Are they going to keep him long-term? Are they going to actually pay him to be on a bad team? Because you also have Josh Giddey, who handles the ball. They both can attack. They both can distribute a bit. Then you have the Dorts of the world and, Pokashevsky. You going to put Poku and Chet together? I don't think so. And if you put Jabari Smith here, I like the fit basketball-wise, right? Because Shai can go to the rim. Giddey likes to get to the rim and distribute. And then you have Smith on the outside to knock down shots, which is something they desperately needed. And I really think Jabari Smith could be good here. I also think Paolo could be good here if you're getting rid of Shai. I think Paolo and Giddey could be good. And if you're not planning on keeping SGA long-term, then that's a good replacement. But if you have SGA and Paolo and Giddey, it's a little bit too much of only one ball kind of problem. So I don't know what ends up happening with that. And then the Rockets, the concern is they're going to take whichever one of these is left, right? But their concern is just culture and fit. And I could see a situation where if Paolo fell to 3rd, that this could be a disaster for him because this team with him and Jalen Green just going to play no defense and have no real identity. I actually don't know what I would want the Rockets. They need to just fix their whole roster problem. But in any case, they're going to take whichever of these 3 is available to them, unless you see some trades happen, which is entirely possible. So that's kind of where I'm at with these top 3 picks. Paolo, Jabari, Chet in that order for me, but most likely draft order, I think, is probably Chet, Paolo, and then Jabari. And maybe see Jabari go 2nd, honestly, because of fit for the Thunder, like I mentioned. And you see Paolo fall to 3rd, which I think would be an absolute steal for the Rockets. If you can get Jalen Green and Paolo on that same team and then trade Wood and get an actual defender in there and get a coach who's going to instill some defensive principles because you already have 2 elite ball handling scorers, that's a core. And I think it would be a steal to get Paolo at 3 no matter what's happening. So that's kind of where I'm at with the top 3. We're going to have more of these videos. I mentioned Keegan Murray. He's a guy that's totally on my list, but you have the Ivies. You have a lot of people. AJ Griffin's falling between, the kid from Kentucky that didn't even play. There's a lot more coming. The draft still is a couple of weeks away. We're going to be making gambling picks on the draft, but they're not quite out right now, and I'm not fully baked on what I want to do with them yet. We'll get there. I said if you follow on Twitter or Instagram at MikeTheMush Sports, I'm very active on both. We put our picks there all the time. A lot of the times we put picks at the end of these videos where we break down the actual picks that we're going to do. But since this is a draft video and we don't have draft picks yet, it seemed silly. Plus, normally this is where I would put NBA playoff picks in, but I'm taking a break from these conference finals, as I've mentioned constantly on the social media pages. It's been tough to figure them out. It's been blowouts back and forth. I'm just waiting, biding my time until we get to the finals. I'm thinking it's going to end up being Celtics and Warriors. And I've been looking for a spot to fade the Warriors. I like them a lot, which is hard, but I've seen them just struggle at certain times before this series especially, but even in the one game where they lost, where it's just like, this isn't the old Warriors team, and I do think they're beatable and vulnerable in certain ways, especially if Rob Williams could play in that series. But we'll get to that. We'll do a whole video predicting the finals, making a series pick, making some leans, maybe some props that we're looking at, and we'll have picks all throughout that. There's plenty more to come. We've been hitting on the Avalanche in hockey. We have them again as I'm recording this video, and if you were following at MikeTheMush Sports on Twitter and Instagram, you'd already know that. We're up 47 some odd units coming in to recording this video. We're trying to crack that 50 plateau. Maybe we'll be there by the time you're watching this. Who's to say? We're sprinkling in some baseball picks. Follow, subscribe on here, give the video a like, comment. It helps with the algorithm. And there's plenty more for you coming as we approach the finals, the draft. Football is going to be here soon. There's a lot to talk about. So we'll see you then. Peace out.